Hey everybody, so this is another video about deconstructing racism and anti-blackness, which I think personally is something that everyone should do. Everyone. Whether you consider yourself racist or not, even if you make simple efforts to not be racist, just know that it's not enough. And the way that I see it, if you're not uncomfortable or being criticized, you're not doing it right. And allow me to explain that in this video. First, I do want to call myself out because the other day I made some videos, or last week I made some videos talking about respecting Black Americans' spaces, and I learned another layer of what that respect entails. Because I had a creator, they didn't call me out specifically, but it was just people mainly in their community who are not Black, who are in pro-Black spaces. And I also want to say this is just this specific creator, and I'm not going to say their name. I want to respect their privacy. And I'm paraphrasing based on what I'm learning from this criticism and this statement. That they say that we need to go back into our own communities and do the deconstructing work amongst them, and or do it with yourself. And I think that I am calling myself out because I was in that space trying to add to the conversation, but then I had to realize that when you think you're being helpful in doing that, you're actually diminishing their opportunity to highlight their own voices and do their own private, protected, sacred work, whatever that might be. By the way, if I ever say anything that seems out of line or incorrect, I am open to the criticism so that I can course correct and become more self-aware. But I am letting it be known that I understand now and am learning to internalize that the work lies solely with me to know if I'm doing it right. If you're seeking out approval or you feel like you need to put on the performance of good, be aware that that can pull you away from the actual substance of good work and what it can actually do to help break down these systems that cause so much harm to Black Americans. And I think that, as an Indigenous person, on my mother's side, who's also mixed and white presenting, who carries that white privilege that I'm getting to understand more and more every day, it's important for us to break down that and make that discernment and that distinction between the performance of good and trying to show or broadcast so that you can get approval, i.e. you have someone else tell you you're doing it right, and actually doing the substantial and uncomfortable and even grieving work that comes from doing the good things, the substance of it, the substance of the good work of deconstruction. And by no means am I saying that I am an expert in this. I'm not. I'm just offering my own personal perspective as I go through this. I'm creating a record for anyone who might feel lost. And I'll tell you this, I am feeling pretty lost, but I think that's by design. and something that we've become too comfortable and normalized with, letting everyone else tell us if we're doing something right, or if we're finding the right resources, or anything like that. I know that we want, for some of us who are sincere, we really, really, really want to know that we're doing this correctly. I know I am. But that does not mean we should go into pro-Black spaces and try to confirm that, or feel like we need to get the thumbs up that we're doing things right. It doesn't seem like that's helpful. It actually is diminishing. And so the best thing that I'm hearing is that, and I'm understanding now, is we must understand how our own communities contribute to anti-Blackness and the history behind it, because it's there. Even if you think it's not, it's there. We must break down these, I almost want to call them illusions, that say that, no, you're a good person, you're not racist. We're missing the point when we try to focus too much on feeling like a good person, because like, we are going to find that we're participating in a lot of harmful systems and a lot of harmful norms that will make us feel like absolute crap people. But that should not be the focus, and it should not slow us down or stop us from doing that work. We have to confront it honestly. We have to do the deconstructing work honestly. And one of the things I love to hear is one particular Black creator says, we are not a monolith. And, you know, that means, from what she said, I'm paraphrasing, but what she said is, we're not a monolith. Some Black people may have a different view of this than others, and that's important to keep in mind too, because they live with being generalized all the time, you know, obviously. And there's so much to work on. This is going to take years, and it's such an important and worthwhile endeavor. And the more of us that do it, the more we can, and the more we're willing to make certain sacrifices of illusions and even admiration of certain public figures, and the more we're willing to make sacrifices of what we once thought was okay in favor of the truth, the better things will turn out for everybody. And you may even feel demoralized, like, I can't believe that I thought that this was okay. I didn't even realize, or even admit that you did realize it and you still participated in something harmful that hurts Black Americans. So for me, taking it away from just talking about that, I want to just say, take a look at yourselves, focus on yourself and your own deconstructing work, and try to avoid seeking approval. And I want to also make the distinction between not seeking approval, but also balancing that with, when you hear a criticism, don't get defensive or closed off. Consider it, listen, and believe the criticism. Evaluate it, and then just course correct and get better. It's a lot like therapy. Like for me, I've been in therapy for about 14 years, but a decade consistently, approximately. And the process is uncomfortable. And I'm glad that I actually have been going through it, because I feel like it's helping me approach this deconstructing work, because it will feel like your whole identity is falling apart. It will feel like all the approval, all of the praise, all of the ideas of what you thought a good person was is coming apart. And that's okay. We must be willing to humble ourselves before this process and make the necessary sacrifices of these old views for much better ones, and understand that it's necessary, and listen to Black Americans in particular when they set a boundary. And just, I'm learning that, and I made a mistake in trying to add my voice to the conversation without realizing that it was diminishing them. And so I'm going to understand where my responsibility lies by focusing on my own work, and also my own Native communities, and learning more about how anti-blackness could be or is running a thread through my own Native community. And I'm also a veteran. I have European ancestry. So just looking at all of that full spectrum, for me, it's like a multifaceted process. Looking at all those parts of my identity and how it ties me to those different communities. And it's not easy. Most people don't take on this kind of work, but I think that this could be the generation that does it. And I want to say I believe in you if you're doing this work. I know that we can, and just concentrate on yourself, concentrate on doing that work yourself, and having the willingness and the courage to understand that a lot of things that you were comfortable with are going to get challenged, and you'll need to destroy them and break them down, and you do have the power to do it. And you'll end up actually becoming a good and better person, instead of just living in a system of approval. Now, the approval thing that I keep mentioning, I have some theories, but I need to verify them, of why that is. And I think many of us, it's not just like an individual family thing. I think it's more like or an individual thing. I think it's a cultural thing, that many of us who were raised in this generation were conditioned to look to authority figures and hierarchies to make sure that we're not stepping out of line. And then even in my own indigenous ancestry, I wonder how much assimilation has played a role in approval seeking, and that sense of safety being tied to approval. So I have some theories I want to investigate into if that's a possibility, and maybe I'll even tie it into my own individual therapy work. But we must, as we are adults, but also like there may be some parts of us that still feel unaddressed in terms of growth, that need more growth. And for me, I'm noticing that there may be many of us out there who need to break away from this pattern of checking in if I'm doing something right, the confidence, and people pleasing is also a role that seems to be possibly tied to all this. There's a pattern that I want us to learn how to break. Like we need no one's approval. We just need to focus on the substance of the work and not look to others as a parental figure or a boss or anyone like that. Be a trailblazer in your own process. Seek approval from no one. I know I've said that a lot, but it's so important, and something that I'm wanting to keep a record of on my channel so I can track my own growth and also share the process with anybody else who is going through this too. Oh, and let me grab some of the books that I've purchased that are part of me doing this deconstructing work. So hold on one second. Okay, so this is small. This is a small start. I haven't been able to really afford a lot of extra books yet, but I started with this small stack right here, and I wanted to show you guys what I've got. So let me start with this one, recommended by one of my other favorite channels. Knitting Cult Lady is the name of her channel, and her name's Daniela, former Captain Mastinik Young. But Amanda K. Gross is the author of this book, White Women Get Ready. And it's talking about, and by the way, I haven't started reading these, full disclosure. I have to create a reading schedule. I'm actually very bad. I'm very bad at managing schedules, but I'm learning about better schedule structure right now so I can actually get things done and actually make room for studying this kind of thing. So it's called How Healing Post-Traumatic Mistress Syndrome Leads to Anti-Racist Change. And I believe, please correct me if this isn't right, but I believe what it's saying is it's talking about the long-term impacts of and the ripple effects of something called post-mistress syndrome, meaning post-slave owner syndrome. Like, I almost wonder if it's part of like moral injury. But I'll delve into it further once I research the book and also read it. Here's another one, Where Do We Go From Here, by the incredible Martin Luther King Jr. God rest his soul. And then Malcolm X, The End of White World Supremacy. God rest his soul, Malcolm X. I've had this one for a while. I actually need to learn how to get comfortable with reading at all. I haven't really voluntarily read books for a rather long time. I wonder why. I haven't actually investigated that. But this one's called How to Be an Anti-Racist, and I apologize if I say this name incorrectly. Ibram X. Kendi is the author. And then I recently got this one called Black Fatigue. How Racism Erodes the Mind, Body, and Spirit by Mary Frances Winters. So, these are a start. I'm looking over in the corner. I have a couple other books, but I need to, but that's basically the start. And I'm going to amass many more of those books. But yeah, I think the most important core message of this video is it's a courageous thing to start this process. It should be the norm. I think that it's our responsibility as citizens to do this work, of deconstructing anti-blackness, because the influence is everywhere. It's a lot like a virus. It spreads everywhere, and it seeps into every corner and every cell of society. And we need to open our eyes to it and break the illusion, which is uncomfortable for a lot of people. They don't want to. A lot of people don't want to do it, but we all need to do it as a bare minimum responsibility as citizens. I think that certain civic duties, need to be adhered to if you want to be a citizen of any country, but in this case, America. We have bare minimum duties to fulfill, I think. And we need to understand that because building community and addressing the harm that our own respective communities have caused against Black Americans is something that we all need to address, and has continually cyclically been ignored and bypassed for generations, for centuries. And this time, we need to look at that. We need to understand that. We should have done it to begin with, but like this pattern of trying to placate and reach across the aisle to racism needs to stop. I know that everyone's scared, but we have to look at that. And then the other core message is we must make the distinction between being an actual good person with substance and a heart of good who's willing to do the work and be uncomfortable and break illusions and look at the truth, right? Versus the performance of good. And that's something I heard in another video, the performance of being a good person, right? So, yeah, it's, we have to make that distinction. And there's some illusions and some ideas that we are going to have to sacrifice and let go of. And build from the ground up. And, I would even dare to say that a lot of Americans are suffering under a form of collective narcissism and challenging our image and the identity that we've been led, that we have accepted is, it causes us to go into defense mode. We want to go into defense mode, and so we have to challenge that mechanism. The other thing that I've been talking about, or that I said I would talk about for a while now, is mainly about, I think, and I'm only speaking on this as a budding idea. I will expand upon it as I grow more and learn more. There should be a bare minimum standard, not just for being a good citizen, but being a good person that we all adhere to in this country. And it doesn't mean that we're stifling our own individuality, but we have to have that balance between our own individual identity and us being aware of our impact in the community that we live in and the things that we must do and the standards we must adhere to in order to contribute to that community. And, speaking from my own experience as a part Indigenous person, excuse me, who has actually, the closest community I found was when I worked at the Native Hospital before I was I worked at the Native Hospital, and I found that it was a beautiful thing to serve my fellow Native people and the people who lived in the villages. I wasn't raised in the village, and it was therapeutic, even though the job was stressful. And I learned a lot, and I'm still learning more. But one thing I noticed is that a lot of them prioritize their communities. They think more selflessly. And what I've had in terms of community mainly is my immediate family. We have a lot of broken links in our Native history because, of the way the government has treated Alaska Native people. But we must, in my view, create a more, I won't say unified standard, but just something that is generally agreed upon. Like, first, respecting other cultures is one, and their traditions, but also when it comes to performing your duties as a good citizen, you vote in a way that protects everyone, that gives us the greatest chance to thrive and succeed in the society that we are living in. Always stand for civil rights. Don't look away when bad things are happening. Be proactive. Don't be afraid to use your voice, speak up, right? And just learn to think selflessly. I hear the phrase, put yourself first, a lot. I think that we need to kind of reframe what that means. So, like, put yourself first, in my case, the way I interpret it is, and I guess maybe I can't think of myself in a certain way. Let me circle back, but I think that the way to reframe put yourself first is you must recognize your power, your impact on the world around you, what gifts you have, what you need to work on, and put that on you and do the necessary work, because it does have rippling impacts on everyone around you. It's your responsibility to do that, and it's my responsibility to do that for myself. If we don't, and we ignore it and do other things that may seem generous, and in a lot of ways they are, you're missing a very important component of doing the right thing and being a better person, because we must pay attention to ourselves and our emotional needs and face our truth just as much as we do active and proactive strategic service for others. And then for me, the bare minimum to being a good person is to firstly, don't avoid certain issues. Like I hear a lot of people saying, oh, I don't get involved in politics. Politics is a very serious reality that we all must live with. We can't ignore it. We can't ignore the reality of politics and how far it reaches into our lives. I know that we all want to think that there's some areas of our lives that aren't impacted by politics, but all of the areas, a lot of areas of our lives are affected by it. And we have to work with that. We have to understand that. So bare minimum for me is, if you want to be a good person, you must understand politics and the way it impacts everyone. And then get involved in the way that you need to, like just go out of your way to understand candidates and what they're about, research them well, vote for the ones that you know will protect everyone's rights and stand up to evil, right? And do the same for yourself, like learn to fortify your courage, so that you can do that in your day-to-day life with others. Help out and love your neighbor. Be ready to face your own accountability, even if it's terrifying. Trust your own instincts, but also like listen, practice active listening, practice active compassion, but learn the distinction between compassion and enabling. Because I think that we as a country and as individuals, as a culture in some ways, we have a tough time making the distinction between empathy, compassion, and enabling. Because enabling to me is about choosing to make room for or comply with harmful things, damaging things, in the hopes that you can love it to being different. And there's just no way that can happen if you keep, because you end up continually sending out the message that it's okay to be treated a certain way, or that you think it's acceptable, and then that harm is being done, and so reaching across the aisle is enabling. Trying to bypass a very real problem or issue rather than confronting it head on is helping harm to continue to perpetuate. And so these are all things that I'm reminding myself as much as I'm speaking them on this video. It's a good thing to keep practicing that. And yeah, so that's the difference between empathy and enabling, is kind of where you place it in a way too. Enabling, if you're not thinking of the people who are being the most impacted by harm, by oppression, and you're trying to protect them by reaching a hand across and trying to stop evil, by being nice to it, that's not effective. That just creates a situation where the cycle can repeat. As I'm learning from listening to all these different amazing perspectives from Black creators. So when it comes to that, this is just some of the things. I'm going to probably write them out more clearly, but that's the start to my thoughts. Sorry, my phone just rang and they're leaving a voicemail, but I just wanted to say there's a lot to cover. And the last note for me, I think, is to reiterate, we need to make a distinction and break down the illusions that make us think that a performance of good and the approval seeking to be good is not the same as actually being good and having substance in your part as a good person who does the right thing without the approval needed because you affirm yourself. And that's so important too. I think that I think is another good reframe for putting yourself first. If we don't affirm ourselves and learn to independently affirm ourselves, and do all the necessary work to do that, we will always try and seek it out in others, and then that can lead to additional continuing harmful effects, I think. So anyway, I'm thinking about all this some more. These, again, are very new thoughts. If anybody wants to share what they feel about what I have to say here, I welcome all discourse. And I appreciate you if you made it to the end of this video, or if you even just stopped by. Thank you. And this is I want us to be the generation that has the courage to do this work. It should not take courage, but it is kind of scary considering what's happening in our country. But then again, Black Americans, and my fellow Native people and a lot of other marginalized groups have been living with this, but especially Black Americans have been living with this kind of horror for their entire existence, for centuries. So we can do this. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much.